Welcome to part 2 of the story of my injury. Since it has been more than 3 weeks since discharge, I will explain the post-discharge story in this video and a few other things as we go. Before we go any further, make sure to subscribe and leave a like on this video. Your support matters during this rough time of my life. Now this video is part 2 to my previous video about the incident. If you didn't see that video, during practice a few weeks ago, I was showing a high bar routine, and when I did my ginger, I came too close and slammed my stomach on the bar. I had surgery and spent 9 days in the hospital. If you want more details of that, you can check out my previous video. I will leave a link in the top of the description. And without further ado, let's get to it. Discharge was on November 13th. I walked all the way to the car from the 6th floor of the hospital. Riding in a car again was such a weird feeling because I had not been in a moving vehicle for over a week. The seatbelt across my stomach wasn't the best feeling ever, and going over bumps and the car hitting the brakes were definitely the roughest parts of the ride. It was about a 30-minute ride from the hospital back to my house. I requested my first meal outside the hospital to be Chinese food, and it was, which was amazing. The day after discharge had its ups and downs, to be honest. I first got the nicest get well cards from some people at school, but the not so nice part was my surgical wound was oozing some chocolate pudding substance. It wasn't actually chocolate pudding, of course. That's just how we described it based on what it looked like. Now previously in the hospital, whenever I would cough, laugh, or sneeze, it would hurt my ab muscles. But at the same time, it was also squeezing blood out through the wound and onto the gown. The surgeons closed the wound with some special medical or surgical glue or something like that, instead of stitches. Now at the hospital, it was just oozing blood, so it was new to see it look like chocolate pudding. My mom cleaned the wound and put a new gauze strip over the wound where it was opening. By the next morning, the wound did not look any better. It was oozing a lot more than the previous day. And to make matters worse, it was also starting to open up at the top too, but thankfully not nearly as big as the opening in the middle, which was like a centimeter long. I know that doesn't seem very big, but it was still oozing quite a bit. Since it was getting pretty bad, my mom called the hospital and they told us to come in because the surgeons wanted to take a look at it. So we had to drive 30 minutes from home to get back to the hospital. But little did we know, this was going to be one of, if not the, worst hospital experience I've ever had in my life. While parking, my mom found a wheelchair outside of the hospital so I wouldn't have to walk around too much. I was then brought in through the emergency section of the hospital, where a doctor did basic vital checks and put us in a temporary room. Several doctors came by to check on the wound. Because the wound was bandaged, every time the doctors had a look, they peeled away the bandages and put it back on every time, meaning it wasn't getting cleaned every time. And the doctors did the most painful operation to date. They stuck the wooden end of a Q-tip into the wound to see how deep it was. It was the most painful thing I've ever experienced in my life. And multiple doctors did it whenever they came in. The surgeons didn't come until later because they were operating on a patient when we got to the room. When they finally came hours later, they did the painful wound poking with the Q-tip, which obviously wasn't very pleasant. When a wound opens like this, they described it as dehissing. And they said a CT scan will be done to check if other layers besides the skin were also dehissing. But the CT scan wasn't ordered until like an hour later. So the CT scan didn't get done for a little while. When it did get done, the results didn't come through until the mid-afternoon. The CT scan showed that all the other layers were okay, and that it was just the skin that was dehissing like that. The surgeon showed my mom that we needed to put gauze strips inside the wound where it was dehissing, using the painful Q-tip method. The doctor said this was supposed to help absorb the oozing fluids. This meant we had to do it at home, which made me super sad. It was also recommended I get antibiotics to help with infections, which was ordered for us to pick up from a local pharmacist. And after other unimportant stuff, we were finally cleared to go home, only to find the pharmacy center was closed. So we just went home. That Saturday at the hospital from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. was a literal shit show. The next few days were not too bad. I was up and walking around often, and we were previously instructed at the hospital to change the gauze over the wound often to keep it clean. But after Saturday, when my mom was informed to use the Q-tips and gauze strips, that made it a lot worse. Not health-wise, pain-wise. I did have a follow-up on November 19th. Not with the surgeons, just with my regular doctor. She said the wound was looking good, even though it was dehiscing slightly in 3 different places and still oozing that chocolate pudding substance. I trust my doctor, but this really surprised me and my mom. The wound was looking disgusting and open in 3 different places. 3! My doctor also mentioned that we need to run a giant Q-tip over it that they provided for us to suck up all the oozing fluids. I called them elephant Q-tips, although I think they're actually called C-section swabs or something like that. Anyways, the doctor showed me and my mom how to do it, and the doctor pushing down with the swab did really hurt, but not nearly as much pain as the wooden Q-tip method from the hospital. After the doctor, I went to see a physical therapist, and the physical therapist was a gymnast just like me when she was a kid, and she understood the story of my ginger crash very well. She also gave good advice on what skills and events would be easiest and which would be harder. We did some exercises and she gave me a list of them to do at home. Some of the exercises were difficult because I had to stand up for a long time, which at the time I could not handle very well, but I have since been getting better. November 22nd was a nice day, I feel like. I got a flu shot in the morning, and since we were near the gym, I wanted to stop by the gym to visit and say hi to my teammates that missed me. Only 3 of them were there, plus coach. They all had no idea I was coming, but they were super happy to see me. I watched them for about an hour and a half and got to see some of the new skills they were working on. My coaches said that they think about me every day and that everyone on team, even the lower levels, are always asking coach when I will return. As of right now, I do not know when I will return, but I do know that I will miss the practice meet and the first meet of this season. First of all, when I heard that this recovery would be several months and that I would be out for the practice meet and the first few meets, it was really sad and disappointing. But I've gotten over it now. But I think I'll still go to the practice meet, not to compete, just to watch my teammates and show support for them. And all in all, it was great to see my teammates and coach. And although it's not looking likely, I still want to make it to at least a few meets this season. My goal is to make it to states. I know it's not very high in the postseason or the playoffs in gymnastics, whatever you want to call it, but I still want to show how far I can go off a recovery like this. I might not have all the skills back, but I still want to make at least some. November 23rd is when I started to drive again. Yay! The last time I drove before that was when I drove to school the morning of November 4th, the same day as my injury. The one thing about driving that was difficult is twisting around to check your blind spots like that. Blind spots? I think they're called blind spots. Yeah, there you go. In fact, to prepare for that, oftentimes at home I would practice looking over my shoulder. Like that. To make sure I could check my blind spots easily and pain-free. Driving wasn't too bad, but I could definitely tell a difference between now and then. And I said earlier that the wound was open in 3 places and was oozing fluids. Since then, the wound has been oozing less and some of the small openings have closed up. This was a good sign, but the large opening near the middle was still oozing, but not as much as before. I'm not sure yet how long it'll take the wound to be fully closed, but only time will tell. On November 24th, I went over to my girlfriend's house. She mentioned at the hospital that when I'm out of the hospital and while I'm recovering, I can come over to our house to watch Marvel movies, but I had a great time and it was nice to have some fun while recovering. Because recovering is never fun. On November 25th, I went back in to give a sample from my drain to test for amylase levels. This will determine if I have healed enough to where the drain will be able to come out. If you want to know the result of the test, you'll have to wait for part 3. Alright, that is all I'm going to explain for today. From now on, I'll be posting new progress videos every time that I can. I will be starting to go back to school next week, and after missing basically all of November, I will have a lot to catch up on and not a lot of time to make update videos for you guys. Hopefully I can get some in while I can. But in the meantime, subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss an update whenever they come. You can also check out some of my other actual gymnastics videos as well. But for now, subscribe, leave a like, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.